There are moments in life when time slows down so completely that you can hear every individual heartbeat. When the air in a room shifts and becomes something thick and unbreathable. When a single sentence, 5 words, maybe 6, rearranges everything you thought you knew about your own life. I had one of those moments on a Tuesday afternoon in October, standing in the lobby of a downtown Chicago office building, holding a paper bag with 2 chicken salad sandwiches and a slice of red velvet cake, wearing my husband's favorite blue sweater because I wanted him to smile when he saw me. I had driven 45 minutes through rush hour traffic to surprise him. I had told myself it was romantic, spontaneous, the kind of thing couples do when they're still in love after 8 years. I was still in love. That part was true. What I didn't know, what I was about 30 seconds away from learning, was that I wasn't the only one. She was standing at the elevator bank when I stepped off, tall, polished, wearing a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had her hand wrapped around my husband's arm, not casually, not the way a coworker might grab your elbow to get your attention. No. Her fingers were curled around his forearm like she owned it, like she had touched that arm 1,000 times before and fully intended to touch it 1,000 times more. And then she looked at me, a stranger in a blue sweater holding a paper bag, and she smiled. Not a confused smile, not an apologetic smile. A slow, deliberate smile, the kind that means the person wearing it knows something you don't. Sorry, she said pleasantly, not looking sorry at all. Are you here to see someone? Yes, I said. My voice came out completely steady. I still can't explain that. I'm here to see my husband. The smile didn't waver. If anything, it got wider. Oh, how funny, she said. And she turned to look at the man standing next to her. My husband, Michael, who had gone the color of old newspaper. This woman says you're her husband. And then, loud enough for the receptionist, the 2 men by the coffee station, and the woman waiting for the elevator to hear, she squeezed his arm and said, "But we both know who your real wife is, don't we, baby?" That was the moment. That was when time stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't drop the sandwiches. I just looked at Michael, at his ashen face, at the way his mouth was opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. And I smiled back at her. Calmly. Slowly. The same kind of smile she'd given me. That's interesting, I said, because I have the marriage certificate, the mortgage, 8 years, and I'm pretty sure I have something else you don't. I let that hang in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then I set the paper bag on the reception desk, turned around, and walked back through the lobby doors. Michael didn't follow me. He stood there, pale and silent, while she kept her hand on his arm. I watched his reflection in the glass door as I pushed through it. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life fall off a shelf in slow motion and shatter on the floor. Good, I thought. Let him watch it fall. But here's the thing about that moment. The thing I haven't told anyone yet. That sentence I said? The one that made him go pale? That wasn't a bluff. I actually did have something she didn't. Something I had discovered exactly 11 days earlier, sitting alone at our kitchen table at 2 a.m, staring at a document I was never supposed to find. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand why that day mattered, why that lobby, why that smile, why those particular words, you have to understand what Michael and I were before that Tuesday in October. You have to understand the life I thought we had. So let me take you back to the version of things I believed in. Back to when our house smelled like coffee and Sunday mornings, and the worst problem I thought we had was which color to repaint the guest bedroom. Michael and I met at a work conference in Nashville in the fall of 2015. I was 31, recently promoted to senior project manager at a mid-sized logistics company in the suburbs of Chicago. He was 33, working in corporate finance, funny and self-deprecating in a way that felt rare among men in suits. We ended up at the same table at a networking dinner, and by 9 o'clock, the rest of the table had drifted away and we were still talking. He had this habit of tilting his head slightly to the left when he was listening to you. Really listening, not just waiting for his turn to speak. I noticed it that first night. I noticed a lot of things that first night. We did the long distance thing for 7 months. Him in Chicago, me traveling back and forth from my apartment in Naperville. Then I relocated. Then we moved in together. Then, on a rainy Saturday in April 2018, he proposed in our kitchen while we were making pancakes. No grand gesture, no restaurant, no audience. Just him, me, the smell of butter in a hot pan, and a ring he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. "This feels like the right moment," he said. "Does this feel like the right moment to you?" It did. It absolutely did. We got married that September. Small ceremony, 42 guests, a venue in the western suburbs, my sister Karen as maid of honor, his college roommate Brandon as best man. My mother cried through the entire reception. His mother, Linda, gave a toast that was 90% about Michael and about 10% acknowledgement that I existed, which I chose to find funny rather than insulting. I was good at that back then, choosing to find things funny. We bought the house in Elmhurst in 2020, a 4-bedroom colonial on a quiet street with a HOA that sent passive-aggressive letters about lawn height and a neighbor named Dave who waved every single morning without fail. The house needed work. The kitchen was stuck in 1987 and the master bathroom had avocado green tile, but it was ours. We spent the first 6 months painting, arguing about paint colors, compromising on paint colors, and then arguing again about whether the compromise color looked good in natural light versus artificial light. It was the kind of arguing that felt like intimacy. By 2022, we had settled into the comfortable architecture of a life built together. Michael had been promoted twice and was now a VP of finance at Hartwell and Associates, a mid-size investment firm downtown. He left the house at 7:15 every morning, took the Metra into the city, and was usually home by 7 in the evening. I had transitioned to a hybrid schedule, 3 days in the office, 2 days working from home, which meant I handled most of the house logistics, grocery runs, the HOA paperwork, scheduling the HVAC guy and the pest control guy and the gutter cleaning guys who came every October. It was a good life. A real, solid American suburban life with a mortgage we could afford, a 401k we were actually contributing to, and plans, real plans, for the future. We talked about kids. We'd been talking about kids for 2 years in the careful, circling way of people who both want something and are both a little afraid of wanting it. We had a savings account labeled Future that we added $200 to every month without ever directly discussing what it was for. We both knew. We just hadn't said it out loud yet. Michael was a good husband. I want to be clear about that because it matters. He remembered things, not just birthdays and anniversaries, but small things. He knew I hated the sound of the TV on in the background when I was trying to read. He knew I needed 20 minutes alone after a hard work day before I could talk about anything. He knew I took my coffee with oat milk and 1 sugar, and that I would always, always choose the window seat. He was attentive. He was present. He was, or so I believed, completely, entirely mine. The first crack appeared in August, about 6 weeks before that Tuesday in October. It was small enough that I almost missed it. Small enough that I told myself I had imagined it. We were at dinner, just the 2 of us, a Saturday night, a new Italian place in Oak Park that Karen had recommended. The food was good, the wine was better, and we were in the middle of a perfectly comfortable conversation about whether to replace the back fence before winter when Michael's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the way his expression shifted. Just for a fraction of a second, something that moved across his face like a shadow. Before he turned the phone face down and picked up his wine glass. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Work thing," he said. "Nothing urgent." I nodded. I let it go. That was a Saturday night and it was work, and he had always been conscientious about his job. That was one of the things I loved about him. But later, when he went to the bathroom, I looked at the phone lying face down on the white tablecloth. I didn't touch it. I didn't pick it up. I just looked at it, and something in my stomach, something small and quiet and instinctive, said, "Look closer." I didn't. Not that night. I wish I had. The drive home took 45 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the entire way, watching the minutes tick forward the way you watch something that no longer feels real. The city gave way to the expressway. The expressway gave way to the suburbs, and by the time I turned onto our quiet street in Elmhurst and saw Dave across the way raking his leaves, I had gone completely numb. He waved. I waved back. That's how surreal it was. I was still capable of waving at Dave. I pulled into the garage, sat in the car for 11 minutes, and then I went inside and made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. Michael called twice before I reached the kitchen. I let both calls go to voicemail. Then he texted, "Can you please call me? I can explain." Then, 3 minutes later, Ashley. Please, and nothing for almost 2 hours, which told me everything about how panicked he actually was. Panicked enough to go silent, which meant he was figuring out his story. Choosing his words. That's what Michael did when he was scared. He went quiet and he constructed things carefully, the way he built arguments in board meetings, measured and precise. I knew his process. I had loved his process. I had called it thoroughness. Now I was sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where he had once slid a ring across to me next to a plate of half-finished pancakes. And I was thinking about how every quality I had admired in him could be flipped over like a coin and show something completely different on the other side. He came home at 8:17. I heard the metro schedule in my head automatically. The 7:42 from Ogilvy, 22 minutes to Elmhurst, 8-minute walk from the station. He'd taken the first train he could after staying late to, what, compose himself? Talk to her? I didn't know. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my cold tea and I heard the garage door go up and I did not move. He came in through the side door. He set his bag down. He saw me at the table. "Ashley," he said. "Sit down," I said. He sat. He looked terrible. Tie loosened, face still carrying that gray, drained quality I'd seen in the lobby glass. He folded his hands on the table in front of him like a man waiting for sentencing. "Her name is Diane Hartwell," he said. "She's the director of—" "I know who she is," I said. "She runs the firm. Her name is on the building, Michael." He blinked. "How long have you known?" "I didn't, until about 3 seconds ago when you just confirmed it." He closed his eyes. That wasn't fair." "No," I agreed. It really wasn't. The silence between us had a texture to it. It wasn't the comfortable silence we'd built over 8 years, the kind that meant we didn't need to fill every moment. This silence had weight. It pressed down on the table between us like something physical. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. That pause, that careful, constructed pause, made my stomach drop straight through the floor. "Michael, how long?" 14 months. 14 months. I did the math without meaning to. 14 months ago was August of last year. August. I was thinking about August, what we had done in August, what we had talked about in August. And then I remembered. Last August, we had gone to his college roommate Brandon's wedding in Wisconsin. We had danced. Michael had spun me around on the dance floor to a Stevie Wonder song, and I had laughed so hard I could barely stay upright. I had thought, standing there in the rented venue with the string lights and the lake outside, that this was what happiness looked like when you were inside it. 14 months ago, while we were dancing at Brandon's wedding, he was already sleeping with his boss. "Did she know about me?" I asked. "From the beginning?" Another pause. Shorter this time, but it didn't matter. The pause itself was the answer. "She knew you existed," he said carefully. "That's not what I asked." "Ashley, did she know you were married? Did she know your wife's name? Did she know anything real about me, or was I just a detail she decided didn't matter?" He looked at the table. "She knew we were married. She knew your name. And she called you her husband anyway. In front of your entire office, in front of me, she called you her husband." I heard my own voice and was surprised by how steady it was. "What is she to you, Michael?" What exactly have you been telling her? He looked up then, and what I saw on his face was something I hadn't prepared for. It wasn't guilt, exactly. It was more complicated than guilt. It was the face of a man who had been holding two separate lives in separate hands and had just watched them collide, and he didn't know which one to drop. I care about her, he said quietly. 3 words. I care about her. Not it was a mistake or it didn't mean anything. The classic, cowardly deflections I had braced myself for. He looked me in the eye and said I care about her, and that honesty, which I had always loved in him, was the cruelest thing he had ever done to me. Okay, I said. I stood up. I picked up my cold tea and poured it down the sink. You should know that I'm calling Karen tonight. And I'm calling a divorce attorney tomorrow morning. Ashley, wait. He was on his feet. Please, can we talk about this? Can we at least try? We just did talk about it. For 10 minutes. 14 years. 8 years. We've been together 8 years. And you're going to throw that away in 10 minutes? You threw it away, I said. 14 months ago. He put his hand on my arm. His touch felt like a stranger's. I looked down at his hand and then up at his face, and something in my expression made him let go. I'm going to stay at Karen's tonight, I said. Don't call me. I went upstairs. I packed a bag. I was methodical about it. Underwear, 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, the charger, my toiletry bag. I moved through the bedroom we had shared for 4 years like I was taking inventory. His side of the closet, his nightstand with the charging cable, and the paperback he'd been reading for 3 months. The framed photo on the dresser from Brandon's wedding. Me laughing. Him spinning me, both of us mid-motion. I left the photo where it was. I was almost at the bedroom door when I stopped. Because there was something pulling at me. The thing I mentioned at the beginning. The document I had found 11 days earlier. The reason those words in the lobby hadn't been a bluff. I had come so close to telling him that night. To confronting him with it directly. Laying it on the table alongside everything else. But something held me back. Some quiet, calculating instinct that felt foreign to me, like a part of myself I hadn't met before. Not yet, that instinct said. Not until you know everything. Because what I had found 11 days earlier wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was something bigger. Something that made the affair look, in a terrible way, like the smaller betrayal. I picked up my overnight bag. I walked past Michael standing at the bottom of the stairs with his hands open at his sides, looking wrecked. I walked through the kitchen, past the table where he had proposed to me, past the coffee maker that still had this morning's grounds in the filter. Ashley, he said, one more time from behind me. His voice cracked on my name. I stopped with my hand on the door. The guest bedroom has clean sheets, I said. Use those. And then I left. Karen lived 20 minutes away in a townhouse in Downers Grove. She met me at the door in her pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a single question. She made me sit on her couch. She got me a glass of water and a blanket, even though it wasn't cold. She sat next to me and waited. He's been having an affair, I said, with his boss. 14 months. Oh, Ashley. She put her hand over mine. Oh, honey. She called him her husband, in the lobby of his office building, in front of everyone. Karen's face did something complicated, grief and fury moving through it simultaneously. She squeezed my hand hard. What do you need? Tell me what you need right now. I need to tell you something, I said. Something I haven't told anyone. Something I found out 11 days ago that I haven't known what to do with. She turned to face me fully. What is it? I looked down at my hands. I had been carrying this alone for 11 days, had gone to bed with it, and woken up with it and driven 45 minutes through rush hour traffic to his office with it sitting in the back of my mind. And I had still smiled at him, still brought him chicken salad and red velvet cake, still worn his favorite sweater. The house, I said. Our house in Elmhurst. I found the refinancing documents, Karen. He refinanced without telling me. 11 days ago, I found the paperwork. I looked up at her. He pulled out $240,000 in equity, and I have no idea where it went. Karen stared at me. The color drained from her face slowly, the way it drains from mine when something shifts from bad to catastrophic. Ashley, I'm not done, I said. Because when I started looking, really looking, I found something else. His 401k. He's been making early withdrawals for the past 8 months. The room was very quiet. How much? Karen asked. $63,000, I said. Gone. Karen didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. We sat on our couch until 2 in the morning, and then 3, and then the sky outside her townhouse windows started going from black to the particular dark blue that means morning is coming whether you want it to or not. She made coffee at 4:15. I held the mug and didn't drink it and stared at the wall behind her television. $240,000, Karen said. She'd said it 3 times already, in different tones. Disbelief, then anger, then something quieter and more frightened. This time it came out flat, like she was testing the weight of it and finding it too heavy to hold. Ashley, that's almost the entire equity you built up in that house. I know. And the 401k withdrawals? 63,000. Yes. So we're talking about over $300,000. She set down her own mug. Where does money like that go, Ashley? That doesn't just... You don't just spend $300,000 on lunches and flowers. I don't know where it went, I said. That's the part that keeps me up. Have you talked to anyone? A lawyer, a financial advisor? No. I found the documents 11 days ago, and I've been trying to figure out what it means before I stopped, pressed my fingers against my eyes. I kept telling myself there was an explanation, that it was a tax thing or an investment thing or something I didn't understand because he handles all the finances. And I let him handle all the finances because I trusted him and I couldn't finish the sentence. Karen moved closer on the couch. She put her arm around my shoulders and I felt my body do something it hadn't done since I walked out of Michael's office building. It gave. Just slightly. Just enough to lean into her. Just enough to feel how exhausted I was. How completely wrung out. I hadn't cried yet. Not real crying. I'd been operating on a kind of cold, functional adrenaline since the lobby, and I could feel it wearing thin. You let him handle the finances, Karen said carefully, because that's what you decided together. That is not a character flaw, Ashley. That is not you being stupid. It feels like being stupid. It's not. Her voice was firm. You trusted your husband. That's not stupid. What he did with that trust, that's on him. I nodded. I knew she was right. I also knew that knowing something is right and feeling it are 2 entirely different things. And right now, every bone in my body was vibrating with the particular shame of someone who realizes they've been deceived for a long time by a person who knew them very well. Michael had known exactly how much I trusted him. He had known it, and he had used it. I finally cried at 4:47 in the morning. Not dramatically. Not the heaving, gasping kind of grief I might have expected. It came out quiet and almost surprised, like my body had just realized what my brain had been carrying for 11 days and decided it couldn't hold it anymore. Karen handed me a box of tissues and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Which was why Karen was the person I called. I cried for about 8 minutes. Then I stopped. I blew my nose. I finished the cold coffee. I need a divorce attorney, I said. Yes, you do. And I need to understand the financial situation before Michael has any idea that I know about it. Because right now he thinks I'm upset about Diane. He thinks this is about the affair. Karen looked at me carefully. And it's not? The affair is... Yes, obviously the affair is. I pressed my palm flat on the cushion next to me, steadying myself. The affair is devastating. I won't pretend it isn't. But if Michael is moving $300,000 somewhere and I don't know where it is and why, then the affair is it's almost a distraction. Do you understand what I'm saying? She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You think the money is connected to her?" The word landed between us. I hadn't said it out loud before, not exactly. But yes, that was the thing that had been sitting at the back of my mind for 11 days, the thing that had made me carry the document and say nothing and drive to his office with chicken salad sandwiches, like everything was normal. Not because I was naive, because I needed to see his face when he didn't know I knew. I needed to read him before he could construct anything. "I think," I said slowly, "that a man who is willing to lie about an affair for 14 months is probably willing to lie about other things too. And I think $300,000 doesn't vanish. It goes somewhere. It goes to someone." I looked at my sister. "And I think I need to find out where it went before I file anything, because the moment he knows I'm filing, whatever's left of that money disappears too." Karen stared at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. The grief was still there, but underneath it, something else was coming up. Something that looked almost like respect. "Okay," she said. "Okay. What do you need?" I slept for 3 hours on Karen's couch. When I woke up at 8:15, my phone had 14 missed calls. 6 from Michael, 3 from a number I didn't recognize, and 5 from Linda, Michael's mother, which meant he had already called his mother, which meant he was panicking in a way that involved recruiting his support system, which meant he was not sitting quietly at home working on his story. He was mobilizing. That was fine. Let him mobilize. He didn't know what I knew. The 3 unknown number calls bothered me more than Linda's. I played the voicemail. It was Diane. Her voice was smooth, controlled. The voice of someone who was used to being the most powerful person in the room. She didn't sound embarrassed about what had happened in the lobby. She didn't sound apologetic. She sounded like a woman making a business call. "Ashley," she said, as if we knew each other, as if we were acquaintances who had run into each other at a party rather than a woman who had publicly claimed my husband in front of his entire office. "I think we should talk. I know this is hard. But there are things you don't understand about the situation, and I think it would benefit everyone if we could sit down like adults. I'm available Thursday or Friday morning. My assistant can set something up." I listened to it twice. Then I put the phone face down on Karen's coffee table and sat with that for a minute. Like adults. As if I had been the one behaving childishly. As if I had caused a scene, when I had done exactly the opposite. She was trying to control the narrative. She wanted to see me before I saw a lawyer. She wanted to know what I knew. I deleted the voicemail without responding. At 9 in the morning, Karen sat across from me at her kitchen table with her laptop open and a legal pad in front of her. She had spent part of the 3 hours I was sleeping doing research, because that was Karen. That was who she was. And she had a list. "Okay," she said. 3 names, all divorce attorneys in the Chicago metro area with experience in financial fraud cases. Not just divorce, specifically fraud. Because if money is being moved out of marital assets, you don't want someone who only knows how to divide a 401k. You want someone who knows how to find money that someone tried to hide. I looked at the list. 3 names, 3 firms, brief notes on each. She had done this in 3 hours, before 8 in the morning while I was sleeping on her couch. "Karen," I said. "Don't," she said. "Just call them." The first firm couldn't see me until the following week. The second had a conflict of interest. They had apparently done work for Hartwell and Associates at some point, which told me something useful about how connected Diane's firm was. The third one, a woman named Sandra Okafor at a firm in the Loop, had a cancellation that afternoon at 2 o'clock. I took it. I borrowed a blazer from Karen's closet and drove into the city. Sandra Okafor's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Wacker Drive, 12 blocks from Michael's office, which struck me as either poetic or terrible. Probably both. Sandra was in her mid-50s, with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of calm, unhurried energy that made you feel immediately like you were in capable hands. She shook my hand, offered coffee, and then sat across from me with a legal pad and a pen and listened without interrupting for 45 minutes while I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, Then she said, "The refinancing. Do you have the documents with you?" "Copies. Yes." "And you said he refinanced without your knowledge or consent?" "Without telling me. I don't know if he forged my signature or—" "That's what we're going to find out," Sandra said. "Because if your signature is on those documents and you didn't sign them, that's not just a marital asset issue. That's fraud, Ashley. That's a crime." The word sat in the air between us like a stone dropped in still water. "The 401k withdrawals," she continued. "Those would have tax implications he can't hide forever. The IRS will see early withdrawal penalties. That's a paper trail." She tapped her pen against the pad. "And the money itself, $300,000 doesn't disappear. It goes into an account, it buys something, it gets transferred. We can subpoena records, we can find it." "How long does something like this take?" I asked. "Depends on how cooperative he is and how good his own attorney is." She paused. "Has he contacted you since yesterday?" "Multiple times. I haven't responded." "Good. Keep it that way until we have a retainer agreement and I'm officially your counsel. Do not discuss the financial documents with him. Do not let him know you've spoken to me. If he brings it up, the refinancing, the 401k, any of it, you say nothing. You say you need to speak to your attorney." "He thinks I'm only upset about the affair." Sandra looked at me steadily. "Then let him keep thinking that. For now." She clicked her pen once. "You came in here thinking this was a divorce case with a financial component. I want you to understand that it might be more than that. It might be significantly more than that. I need you to be prepared for that." I nodded. My hands were folded in my lap and they were perfectly still, which surprised me. 2 days ago, I had been a woman in a blue sweater carrying chicken salad sandwiches. Now I was sitting in an attorney's office on the 14th floor of a building on Wacker Drive, and something inside me had gone very quiet and very focused. The way it goes quiet in the middle of a crisis at work, when there's no time for panic and only time for the next right step. "I'm prepared," I said. "Good." Sandra wrote something on the pad. "There's one more thing I want to ask you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. You said Diane Hartwell, that called you this morning. She wants to meet." "Yes." "Have you considered," Sandra said carefully, "that she might not know about the money either?" I went still. It was a possibility I hadn't let myself consider. I had assumed the money and Diane were connected, that the $300,000 had gone to her, or toward her, or to some shared future I hadn't been invited to. But what if that wasn't true? What if Diane, for all her polished confidence and her hand on my husband's arm, was also missing pieces of the picture? What if Michael had been running something that neither of us fully understood? "I think," Sandra said quietly, watching my face, "that before we decide how to approach this, you might want to know the answer to that question." I sat back in my chair. Through the window behind Sandra's desk, I could see the Chicago River 14 floors below, gray-green and moving, and the city spread out on both sides of it, indifferent and enormous. Somewhere in that city, Michael was making phone calls, choosing his words, constructing something. And somewhere in that city, Diane Hartwell was waiting for me to call her back. And somewhere, in an account, in a property, in some arrangement I didn't yet have the shape of, was $300,000 that belonged, at least in part, to me. Sandra slid a retainer agreement across the desk. I picked up the pen. I signed the retainer agreement on a Wednesday. By Friday, Sandra had already subpoenaed the refinancing documents from the title company. What she found confirmed the thing I had been afraid to say out loud. My signature on the refinancing paperwork was not my signature. The notary stamp was real, a licensed notary in Cook County, but the signature on the line marked Ashley Renner was a forgery. Someone had signed my name to a document that pulled $240,000 out of our home, and they had paid a notary to certify it. That is not a marital dispute. That is a crime. Sandra said it again, and this time the word didn't sit in the air like a stone. It landed like a verdict. She filed the divorce petition on Monday. She also contacted a forensic accountant named Patrick Huang, who specialized in tracing hidden assets. Patrick was quiet and methodical and wore the same gray cardigan to every meeting. And within 72 hours, he had found the first thread. The $240,000 from the refinance had moved through two accounts, one in Michael's name, one in the name of an LLC registered in Delaware 8 months ago. The LLC was called Hartwell Renner Ventures, LLC. Both names, her name and his name. Together in a business entity, for 8 months. I sat in Sandra's office when Patrick showed me that document, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not grief this time, but something colder and more clarifying. Like stepping outside in January and having the cold air hit your face, and suddenly you can see everything very clearly. She knows, I said. It appears so, Sandra said. She's not a victim in this. No, Sandra said. She doesn't appear to be. I thought about the voicemail. I think we should talk. There are things you don't understand about the situation. She had wanted to meet before I found a lawyer. She had wanted to sit across from me and manage what I knew. And I had deleted her voicemail and walked into Sandra's office instead. And that decision, made in Karen's living room on 3 hours of sleep, had probably saved me from losing everything. What do they have? I asked Patrick. What did they build with it? Patrick opened his folder. The LLC purchased a commercial property in Logan Square 7 months ago. Purchase price was $310,000. The $240,000 from the refinance was the down payment. The remaining $70,000 was drawn from Michael's 401k over the following 8 months. And the property? It's a mixed-use building. Ground floor retail, 2 residential units above. It's currently rented, generating income. He set a photo on the desk. A brick building on a corner, a coffee shop on the ground floor, flower boxes in the upper windows. It looked like every charming Logan Square building you'd walk past on a Sunday morning without a second thought. I stared at it. They built a real estate investment. Together, while he was married to me, using our money. Using marital assets, yes. Which means that property is a marital asset, Sandra said. Or at least 50% of it is. And the income it has generated since purchase is also a marital asset. Which means, Ashley, that this gets significantly better for you. I kept staring at the photo. The flower boxes were yellow. Someone had picked out yellow flowers for the window boxes of a building bought with my equity, my home, my 8 years. I found that detail almost funny in a way that had nothing to do with humor. I want to confront him, I said. I know, Sandra said, and you're going to. But I want you to wait 10 more days. Patrick is still pulling threads. And I want everything documented before Michael has any reason to move money again. I waited 10 days. It was the longest 10 days of my life, and also, in a strange way, the most focused. I went back to work. I answered emails. I attended a project meeting on Thursday morning and contributed 3 substantive points, and nobody in that conference room had any idea that I was a woman whose husband had forged her signature on a mortgage document and purchased real estate with her stolen equity. I was very good at appearing fine. Michael had given me a lot of practice. He texted twice during those 10 days. The first text said, I know you're staying at Karen's. I'm not going to push. I just want you to know I'm ready to talk whenever you are. The second, 5 days later, said, Linda is asking about Thanksgiving. I didn't know what to tell her. I did not respond to either. Sandra had told me not to communicate with him outside of what she reviewed first, and I was very good at following instructions when I understood why they mattered. On day 10, Sandra called me at 8 in the morning. Patrick is done, she said. We have everything. How do you feel about Monday? I feel good about Monday, I said. The meeting was Sandra's idea. Not a deposition, not a courtroom, not yet. A conference room in her building on Wacker Drive, 14 floors up, with the Chicago River visible through the windows. Michael and his attorney on one side of the table. Me and Sandra on the other. And at Sandra's specific and deliberate request, Diane Hartwell. Diane had agreed to come. I think she thought she was coming to negotiate. I think she thought this was still a conversation she could manage. She arrived in a charcoal blazer, a different one from the lobby, but the same color, same quality, same effect. She sat down across from me and she looked at me with that same measured, controlled expression I had seen in the elevator bank, and she folded her hands on the table. Michael sat next to her. He didn't look at me when he came in. He sat down and stared at the middle distance between us like a man trying to disappear into the furniture. Sandra opened the folder. "We're going to skip the preamble," Sandra said pleasantly, "because I think everyone in this room already understands the basic situation. What you may not fully understand is the scope of what we've documented." She slid the first document across the table. Hartwell Renner Ventures, LLC, registered in Delaware. Both your names, both your signatures. Diane's expression didn't change. Michael's jaw tightened. The LLC purchased a property in Logan Square using funds drawn from two sources: a refinancing of the marital home in Elmhurst, a document that bears Ashley's forged signature, and early withdrawals from Michael's 401k, which are marital assets subject to equitable distribution. Sandra slid the second document. Patrick? Patrick opened his own folder and placed a clean, organized financial summary on the table. Columns, figures, dates. $303,000 traced from source to destination, step by step, with account numbers and transaction dates and property records. It was the least dramatic document I had ever seen and the most devastating. Diane's attorney leaned in and murmured something. Diane did not murmur back. She was looking at the summary with an expression I couldn't quite read, something that was moving beneath the polished surface of her face, something that looked almost like recalculation. "Ms. Hartwell," Sandra said, "I want to give you an opportunity to speak before we proceed, because there are two ways this can go. The first involves a cooperative settlement in which the marital property, including the Logan Square building and all accrued rental income, is valued, divided, and resolved through civil proceedings. The second involves us forwarding the notary fraud documentation to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, at which point this becomes a criminal matter." She paused. "I'd like to give everyone in this room the chance to choose the first path." Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned and looked at Michael. And Michael, for the first time since he'd walked in, looked at me. He looked terrible. He had looked terrible for the past 3 weeks. Gray, depleted, like a man running on borrowed time. But this was different. This was a man who had just understood, fully and completely, that the story he had been telling himself, the one where he managed everything, where he kept both worlds separate and intact, was over. It had been over from the moment I walked into that lobby with chicken salad sandwiches and didn't blink. "I'm sorry," he said, not to his attorney, not to Diane. To me. I looked at him. I thought about Nashville in 2015 and the way he tilted his head when he listened. I thought about pancakes and a ring on a Saturday morning. I thought about Brandon's wedding and a Stevie Wonder song and laughing so hard I couldn't stand up straight. I thought about the savings account labeled future and the $200 we put in every month. "I know," I said, "but sorry doesn't give me back the equity in my house." Diane's attorney spoke up then. They wanted to negotiate. Of course they did. What followed was 2 hours of back and forth that I will spare you the details of, except to say that Sandra was extraordinary. She was precise and relentless and utterly unsentimental, and she knew exactly what every asset was worth and exactly what leverage we held. The forged signature was the keystone. It transformed the entire financial dispute from a civil matter into a criminal exposure, and neither Michael nor Diane wanted criminal exposure. Diane especially did not want criminal exposure. Her name was on the building. Her firm had a reputation. She had clients who would not stay clients if her name appeared in a fraud case in the Tribune. We settled 14 days later. The Logan Square property would be listed for sale, and I would receive 60% of the net proceeds, above the standard 50 because of the fraud element. Michael's 401k balance, including penalties and taxes already owed, would be valued and offset against my share of our other joint assets. The Elmhurst house would be sold, and after the mortgage balance, I would receive my full equity share. All told, Sandra estimated my total recovery at somewhere between $400,000 and $420,000, depending on the property sale. I also filed a complaint with the Cook County Notary Licensing Board regarding the notary who had certified my forged signature. I don't know what happened with that. I didn't follow it. Some things you let go because pursuing them costs more than they're worth. I moved out of the Elmhurst house in November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Karen and her boyfriend helped me load the moving truck. Dave came across the street and helped us carry boxes, the way Dave always did everything. Steadily, without being asked, without making it a thing. I shook his hand at the end and he said, "You take care of yourself, Ashley." With a kind of simple sincerity that hit me somewhere unexpected, I drove away from that quiet street with the HOA and the colonial and the avocado green tile, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. I am writing this from a one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. It has big windows and a radiator that clanks in the night and a coffee shop on the corner that I've been to every single morning for 4 months. It is the first home that has ever been entirely mine. My name on the lease, my choices on the walls, my coffee maker with my grounds in the filter. I spent Thanksgiving with Karen and her boyfriend and my mother, who cried, which she does at everything. But this time I didn't choose to find it funny. This time I let her cry and I held her hand, and I thought about how lucky I was to have people who showed up. Michael and I finalized the divorce in February. I signed the papers in Sandra's office on a Thursday afternoon. I wore a gray blazer, not charcoal, not Diane's color. My own gray, my own choice. I signed my name on the line, and this time it was actually my signature, and I watched the notary stamp it, and I felt something leave my body that I hadn't known I was still carrying. I haven't spoken to Michael since the conference room. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he and Diane are still together. I genuinely don't think about it very much, which surprised me. I thought I would think about it constantly. I thought the unanswered questions would eat me alive. But here's what I know now that I didn't know in that lobby in October, holding my paper bag with the chicken salad sandwiches and the red velvet cake. The most dangerous thing about a well-constructed lie isn't what it takes from you. It's what it makes you stop trusting in yourself. For years, every instinct I had, every quiet voice that said, "Look closer," I had talked myself out of it. I had called it paranoia. I had called it unfairness. I had chosen to find things funny instead of finding them true. I don't do that anymore. The morning I walked out of that lobby, I had smiled at a woman who was trying to make me feel small. And then I had said one sentence that wasn't a threat, and wasn't a scene, and wasn't the thing she expected. I had been calm. I had been clear. I had already known more than she thought I knew, and I had been willing to walk away and let the next steps speak for themselves. That is who I am now. I think, actually, it's who I was all along. I just needed an October Tuesday and a paper bag and a woman in a charcoal blazer to show me. Some things fall off the shelf in slow motion. What matters is that you don't break with them.